I call the honourable member for Chifley.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the opposition, I'm pleased to speak to the review of the Reserve Bank of Australia Annual Report 2013, thank the Chair and also acknowledge in the chamber the presence of my colleagues, the members for Rankin and members for Charlton. I echo the sentiments of the Chair, expressing gratitude for the time and assistance of the RBA Governor, including that of his senior executives who appeared before the committee in December. And additionally, I also express appreciation for the great work of the committee secretariat. While the world's managed to avoid the type of collapse feared in the aftermath of the worst economic conditions in nearly 8 decades, many countries are still dogged by lower-than-average growth, stubborn unemployment, and in some cases have had to cope with double-dip recessions. Since our prosperity can be affected by the health of our trading partners, the RBA's assessment of global economic strength is crucial, and looking to the world stage, the RBA noted in December there were positive signs emerging from Europe, the US and China, but the tide of perception has started to shift even since then. In Europe, for instance, anxiety about the future of its financial system has been replaced by concerns expressed via the IMF in January about the signs of potential deflation. And in the US, relief surrounding tapering has been muted by concerns as expressed by new Fed chairwoman Janet Yellen about soft data appearing over the last 6 weeks, pointing to less favourable numbers on jobs, housing, retail sales and industrial production. And in China, the economy has defied predictions of contraction, but minds are directed towards a continued growth of its shadow banking system and its possible impact within and beyond China. In the Australian context, we need to be exceptionally mindful of this, especially considering the RBA take on lower-than-trend growth. While keeping an eye on the soft world economy, we should be concerned about the possible impact on our own economy of confused and contradictory decision-making. It's taking a long time for this government to respond in an adult way to the reality plaguing governments world over: subdued economic conditions, sporadic job growth, revenue refusing to lift in the way it did. In many cases, it appears this government's actions could weaken our economy at a time when the world economy remains weak. We've seen a government unable to respond to job shedding occurring under its watch at the rate of 1 job every 3 minutes since its election. Retailers now express concerns about the impact of this on discretionary spending at a time when the RBA observed subdued growth in private domestic demand. We've seen a government send conflicting signals about fiscal strategy, contemplating contractionary expenditure cuts while planning to levy business to fund an excessive paid parental leave scheme. And we've seen a government block access to crucial foreign investment for firms like GrainCorp, while seemingly chasing out of the country firms like Holden, but then seeking foreign capital for Qantas. We've also seen not only refuse to consider co-investment in firms helping boost economic activity in regional Australia, but then pressure these firms to aggressively cut wages and undermine purchasing power of families within these regions. Disturbingly, the Reserve Bank Governor warned in December that it was difficult, and I quote, to predict the timing and strength of the expected upturn in non-mining investment, but in the last week we see new figures pointing to a sharp contraction in non-mining business investment at a time when it's needed to actually offset the anticipated slide in mining sector investment. On top of this, while repeatedly trying to condition the broader public about expenditure cuts, this government's other spending decisions have been simply extraordinary. Most notably, its decision to grant the RBA close to $9 billion in government support, as referred to in this report. Although seeking to suggest the RBA was pushing for the grant, it was obvious from our hearings that the Treasurer himself had not only decided that the grant should be paid, but it was he and he alone that determined that the $8.8 billion in scarce funds should be paid in one lump sum. And while claiming this money was urgently needed, the Treasurer failed to mention that the funds wouldn't be paid immediately, but sometime in the first half of 2014, and that the RBA would actually be in a position to provide a dividend to the government in the second half of 2014. Most importantly, what is clear is that this money was not necessarily needed to shore up the RBA, but it was used to score political points by the Treasurer, made at the expense of families or communities. You only have to scroll through the cuts contained in my EFO and this becomes painfully clear. I commend the report to the House, but flag the opposition's concern about the excessively generous and ill-considered decision of the Treasurer to replenish the Reserve Bank Reserve Fund in the way that he determined.